Hello, I'm John Murphy, and I'm a co-creator on Cosmic Debris, a space opera, trope-loving romp comic there with Stu Perrins, myself, and Rob Jones lettering, and Carly Murphy on edits and design. And you can find us over on Amazon, Comixology, Drive-Thru Comics, through Marcosia Comics, and come see our comic when you're not watching and listening to Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're joined today by a very talented creator and illustrator of many amazing comics. He is here today talking about an amazing new comic that I just happened to read upon, which is part of a 5-issue series called Cosmic Debris. We are joined by the ever-talented John Murphy. How are you doing today?
Can't complain, Kurt. Thanks for asking. And yourself?
Doing good. You know, you survive bad weather and you come out better than ever, so to speak. For those that don't know anything about yourself as a creative person, tell us who you are and what you're bringing to Two Geeks Talking.
Right now, bringing a sequential storytelling endeavor here in the form of 5-issue arc, trope hugging, lots of fun, kind of escapism, inspired by being shut in during COVID, watching and rewatching and enjoying Voyager and these particularly these holodeck Captain Proton episodes, and going back and forth talking with another friend who's also shut in, writer Stu Perrins, and his love of Flash Gordon and our mutual love of just the ability to get lost in these just hokey, over the top, stripped back to the basics, super trope. I don't know what to say. And so it was just this endeavor started out between the two of us as kind of a way to stay sane through COVID. That's where it really began, and then started to kind of grow into a full-blown comic from there. Ran that by Marcos over at Marcosia, and they liked it.
What is Cosmic Debris actually all about?
There's some themes in there and stuff that we were just, kind of dealing with, every day, these really heavy negative news cycles, and we have a regular mustache twirling villain in there, Otto the Obscene, and he embodies some of these fears and these things and these kind of our fears around seeing a rise of autocracy, autocratic flexing in our politics, while having that simultaneously coupled with, an existential pandemic thing. And there's a lot of stress coming from that. It just, the whole thing feels otherworldly and surreal. And I think it knocked us all for a loop in that way. And so there's a couple of people kind of attempting to just cope with that and find a place to put it where, and with King Otto the Obscene, we have some amount of power where the story goes that we don't, really have in the real world, So this is a place where we get to exert a little control over the outcome of the story and how it goes. So there's a bit of that going on in there, leading into kind of finding a feeling of hopefulness from these characters that are more coming from different walks of life that are just kind of trying to get through the day. These aren't exactly, the children of privilege or anything like that, what our cast is put together out of. So that's kind of, how we feel too. It's just, we're just kind of workaday, regular people without, otherwise without much power, being kind of thrown into this bigger world that we're subject to. Cosmic Debris deals with that. It's our personal way of escaping it. Yeah, acknowledging this big, horrible existential threat.
Well, that's what I loved about reading the first couple of issues there here as well. And I'll leave the spoilers to you if you so choose to give them here. But I loved the cast of characters were really engaging, really easy to get into. The colors were just beautiful. It had a wonderful vibe of kind of like 80s colorful cartoons and 90s feels for action and things like that. With the enough absurdity just to make it a believable sci-fi tale as well.
There's definitely a lot to the bright colors and to the approach of it. Like my formal education is primarily in animation, looking towards the mechanics of motion and kind of bending, breaking perspective rules, if you will. And a lot of this was intentionally, like we thought about like, oh, well, we could put we could get additional team members or this or that, or put it through more and more revisions or something and highly edited. But part of this too was supposed to be simply like, hey, no, this is just a indie thing from just a small handful of people. So let's let it show some of its process and some of its rough edges, because that in and of itself is kind of a testimony to, hey, you can be stuck indoors and trapped kind of, and find this inward escape and make this outward expression of it and share it with others, and thus feel more connected to one another despite our current circumstances.
Let's talk about this amazing team that you have that actually helped put this all together. You mentioned Stu as well, but what was everyone's roles and how did you all meet together to come up with Cosmic Debris?
Well, Stuart and I met, I think, largely through Twitter, not in real time. I've met, several friends here or there, and through, regular Comic-Cons, through other types of art jobs. And this is my first real, push into sequential art personally. Stuart, we met through just, collaborating on a fun little webtoon. Like a couple of years ago, or having a mutual friend that was doing about the same. So we just followed each other on Twitter and fell into a conversation, honestly. So it was quite by happenstance. Maybe we wouldn't have even been online like as much as we were, if not for the current circumstances. So, in that sense, it was very much, something that was born from the pandemic in the UK. And then me being out here, in California. So that is where that starts. And then meeting Rob was through just an interest in indie comics and following other people's comics and artists that I'm interested in, and that work on me, or I'm learning something from looking at their work. And and Rob was one of these letterists that popped up on several different titles. So it was like, hey, this looks good. Once we decided we were going to make this comic, I just approached Rob and asked him if he'd like to be on board. As we got into the first issue, then my spouse and I, Carly, began to take a look at Cosmic Debris together, how it sat with her. Carly had just finished her education, her bachelor's, and was with an emphasis on, on storytelling, creative writing, had some editing work as well, and big sci-fi fan, really up on, always getting me up to speed there, who's who and all the classics and all that kind of stuff. She came on board and started giving me some guidance and helping me with direction, and then basically took over just editing and getting the direction smoother and feeding into the design and the color choice and the palette choices that went particularly into the second issue. So you start to really kind of see her touch on the second issue, and then you're gonna feel it more full force in the third issue that's coming up. And so she's got a really great eye for the mechanics of storytelling and what needs to be there to push the story forward and what might be extraneous. So we can expect to see things streamline even a little bit going forward.
So what's the most misunderstood aspect about the sci-fi genre that maybe people who don't follow it misunderstand?
Oh, wow. Gosh, I don't know that, that there's a big, a lot of sweeping, very general thing. And I'm not sure exactly what a lot of people make of sci-fi, or how many people like take it like real seriously or something like that, or what have you, or this is the stuff of pop culture. I think there's a lot of people who would definitely not say that of Asimov or of a lot of these questions that come up talked about in a much more complicated way, say with like Martin Heidegger, or when you're getting into Western philosophy and stuff. So there's what do people have to say about sci-fi as a genre and as it permeates out into, like, on my level as a folk purveyor of this stuff? I don't know what people's misconceptions may or may not be. I think it can work as an effective metaphor. Oftentimes it's talking about the here and now, and, kind of looking at our better or ideal selves. Kind of thing, as much as it is projecting into possible futures. I know my thing with Star Trek, and like a lifelong love of Star Trek, is just this, the whole idea that of it depicting a reasonably bright outcome for humanity, which is, something that as much as I love dystopian stuff and in its place, there's also a place, I think, for kind of space opera, sci-fi, and things that are a bit more lighthearted, and and a place to lose oneself. If anything, in Star Trek, again, it's like when you look at what Tom Paris is up to with the Captain Proton holodeck time, is, they talk about the justification for this later when they get into the holodeck episodes where Janeway finally allows herself to have some time, and the modeled after the Irish village, with the spirit folk themes and all these sort of things. So maybe that's what's, if there's stuff that's misunderstood, it's like how useful of a literary tool it actually is, maybe.
I mean, if they take it at face value, they could easily just brush it off and not understand the intricacies of what stories or what metaphors or themes they're trying to tell, obviously, too. So I
could see that. There's, I always hear, and I have several conversations regarding, like, the slickness or the sleekness of a piece, and how much cynicism does that or does that not convey. At what point, do you really invite the reader, the listener, or the looker, the observer, in to participate with you, and how approachable is the piece, kind of thing. So I think there's a bit to presentation. Presentation has to do with artist intent, I think, too. Is it supposed to feel kind of warm and fuzzy and folky? I think Cosmic Debris is. It's very much supposed to be rough around the edges and Captain Proton, and something that we went to the holodeck and programmed this the best we could, to get through the day, and also to say, hey, you can do it too. We can be creators and as well as consumers, and participate in this bigger dialogue.
The characters that you've developed with Stu and, your amazing team together here, what was the first image that kind of popped into your mind as you were maybe sketching or drawing one day that just really inspired this Cosmic Debris to its current state?
Oh, wow. Well, I actually wish I kind of had those, because I have some initial character designs that were right around here. Part of this was really hitting on this. All roads lead back to Captain Proton. So, there's Chaotica, and he's out to win the heart of Arachnia, the queen of spider people. And, and that kind of really sparked the conversation about Flash Gordon with Stewart and these outrageous mustached twirling villains, and just like our mutual love of that. And then that's the first initial drawings that popped out. And like, the more outrageous, the better, So it's like, there's so many just great artists out there. I started getting into, like, looking at characters like the Joker and stuff like that, and his treatment over time, and these artists that would use these heavy, like, lurching, furrowed brows to convey this, like, just insanity, just somewhere completely elsewhere, as we all know the Joker to be, right? Yeah. if there's one thing that's consistent about him, it's that, there's so many great ones in there too, portrayals. It's too many for me to list. That's where it really started. And then it branches out from this Orlok Shrek character. Everything permeates from him, and Otto almost immediately gets born. And then we started thinking of this, that Otto needed sycophants, because we were very, very concerned about some of the things that were going on, and we're like, how do we comment on that or show those people and, what we're seeing at least. And then it just started into this flood of like, okay, let's find all the most ridiculous, over the top, mustache twirling villain stuff we can find. And then, that's what we want to bring to the table here.
Well, you've succeeded so far, and I can't wait to see how this all comes about and comes to an end once you reach issue 5 here as well too. So I'm loving, like I said, what you've done so far, and I can't wait to see more coming in the future. Who are your top 3 muscle twirling villains that you can safely say are the worst in all of media?
Oh gosh. And I could almost halfway cosplay him right now as Fifth Element, and it's Zorg, I believe, but it's Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
and this is all Mobius's concept art. I believe that went into the foundations of this, like what's not to love about him and Jodorowsky. But that character was just he was fantastic to me. There's certain like actors actually that I really like that are like the Snidely Whiplash, kind of classic to me. And one of the other ones was Alan Rickman, and it just that is just his attitude, his swagger, and the way he would go about delivering his lines as a villain. Like he really got me. And one of these ones was I don't remember too much of the movie itself outside of just like, to me the Robin Hood movie was probably like, I don't know whether it was good or not, but it was all set up for this one Alan Rickman line for me, which was, I'll cut his heart out with a spoon, and then you have sycophant. Well, why? Because it'll hurt more, and it's just his delivery. He's amazing. What's not to love about that guy? There's deeper villains that aren't mustache twirling ones that I'd like to get into someday. But right now, these ones, that come across really straightforward, and they're proud of their villainy. It's like Titus Andronicus and Aaron giving his speech, his vindicated speech at the end, and what a proud piece of villainy he has constructed for his enemies, and to exact his revenge upon them, although he comments his worst. But there's a few of them out there for him. But yeah, Rickman, Zorg, wow, Fifth Element for sure. I think the one that got me the most, and the name eludes me right now, and she is just amazing. She was in the Pulp Fiction thing, and she really pulled together this Star Trek season of Picard for me recently. And she was driving this great big ship, the Shrek or something like that, and this Picard thing. And I was like, wow, if I'd only seen this when I was thinking of this character. That's another one.
The publishing side of things here, obviously, Marcosia is something you mentioned as well too. Talk about your journey so far of how you, as an independent creator, have been published, and where we can find the current issues of Cosmic Debris as well.
Yeah. So right now, the first couple of issues are over on Amazon Comixology, and everyone, people have their feelings. I have my feelings as well. Issue 1 I know is up on Drive-Thru Comics, and I believe issue 2 should be there shortly if it's not there already. There's some alternative sources to that. I can't speak beyond that for what else is out there. I know there's some other great digital comics platforms, but Drive-Thru Comics right now is the one that Marcosia is working through a lot for a Comixology alternative. And there it shall be until we hit the 5th issue. And then once that happens, then there may be a small print run if we continue to build a little bit of interest, which right now it seems like there is. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best, and just enjoy ourselves and enjoy the ride here with the next 3 issues.
What was an early experience where you learned that language had power, and this can be either the written word or the visual?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. But I was probably, I was pretty young. I think, and that's like a core root question where you can see the turn of a phrase or a simple expression of affection or endearment towards someone and see it affect their mood, or perhaps change their mood, perhaps from something sad or something along those lines to something that is a bit more joyful. The ability to bring a change of cheer, so to speak, with just the turn of a phrase is. I think probably the first time I came across that is just interacting with my mother, probably as a kid, and this is something that I became intrigued with more deeply, later in like junior high school, and really reading and more historical, nonfiction and fiction. Really, really intrigued at this point at what can be done with just a word. And then there was a deep love affair of Ralph Bakshi, and I like a lot of his work, but Wizards in particular, really gets down to this with Black Wolf, Avatar's brother in this, and that is when it's like, hey, that's how powerful words are.
Everyone usually asks, what's the wisest piece of advice, or what's the most BS piece of advice that you've ever received? But what is the second wisest piece of advice that you've received that has stuck with you in your career?
Wow. That's a tough one. Again, there's a couple different things there. There's, a friend of mine, Brandon, told me, when I was really in the throes of anxiety and really have a lot of self-esteem issues that are born from a rough childhood and stuff, that are ingrained stuff. And he's like, hey, if you need to always believe that your work has merit. If you don't believe your work has merit, you will stop working. And that's one of those, okay, that's a big, heavy hitting thing, as far as, we're talking about just kind of the need to work, the feeling, the compulsion to create. So, you really kind of have to create to feel good. Wow, the second wisest thing. One of the things that I've heard for a couple of people, because I've heard, I guess my first review that I felt to be unfavorable or something, I immediately got my feelings hurt and everything. And I was outraged, and, I'm over it now. And that's one of the things is, like, a couple of my friends were telling me, Murph, it's like, hey, you don't make this stuff for everyone. It's not for every single person or this or that. So don't get your head wrapped around the axle, and don't get beat up on whether it works on one person and not the other, or this or that, and so see the separation there of your emotional attachment, and seeing it as an extension of yourself, and let them have their own experience with it, without me interfering at that point. So I thought that was, like, really important for my mental health as a creator.
Everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
Wow. My original animation teacher really, like, set me on a very good path, Jerry Bryce. I was lucky enough to study under him for a while and to get an idea of what my life might look like as a tweener or with Disney. And that person is, really just, like, had so much to do with my development, and, looking at classical artists, El Greco, looking at other artists, Ernie Barnes, really getting into Tex Avery and motion jokes and Chuck Jones, so that stuff is really just, wow, that's the foundation stuff for me as an artist. And then there's one or two other really pivotal people in comics that just made me feel welcome, and encouraged me, hey, why don't you give, crossing over a try? And you seem to really love storytelling. You might be good at this. That would be, one of the really warm, inclusive people was Chris Roberson. It was just really nice to me and encouraged me just take a look around and learn as much as I could and get involved. And, just that encouragement and allowing me to, kind of like look around this field that I hadn't even really realized was there, or how to look at it.
From a professional standpoint, you're, of course, an amazing illustrator and comic creator, not only with Cosmic Debris, but I'm sure other works that we haven't had a chance to talk about, which just means you have to come back on the show in the future and we'll dive into whatever you decide to create and enjoy. And I'm sure it'll be a wonderful experience overall because I love what you're doing and I can't wait to see what else you do. So professionally, you're successful in that regard. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
Wow. I consider myself personally really, really very, very lucky. It's just absolutely very fortunate, and for the most part, I've gotten to string together a series of sign design and production art, page layout jobs. And there's been some real hard, underwater welding, stint of learning how to hard hat dive, all that kind of stuff with the Navy to pay for a GI Bill to keep going to school, and some construction. And just being able to string it all together is, I guess that's success. I think there's a lot of luck, a whole lot of luck.
I was going to say, is it truly peaceful underwater diving and welding at the same time?
Absolutely. The first time that I was a few hundred feet down, where I was able to, it's something else. It's otherworldly, encounters with other creatures, as well as just going about your business and getting your job done when you're there. But I don't really have words for it. And that's why I'm starting actually some other journaling and some other drawings around that. And yeah, there's a lot there. It's very peaceful at times. Sometimes it's terrifying.
What was a peaceful moment and what was a scary moment then when you were underwater?
I think the most peaceful moment, I was just walking around an older wreck, and I came across an open compartment towards the tail end of it, and there's just this great big, much bigger than me grouper living in this cave and just kind of slowly breathing, and and wasn't really bothered by me at all. Didn't seem to mind that I was there. And just kind of sat there with it for a little while and just kind of oh, my comms aren't working. I'll be with you in a few moments, and took some time off on that dive, and it was worth it.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Yeah, I think that's tied to what do I define as a failure from self. And I think I define inward or a failure of myself as a collapse of emotional bandwidth as a result of being overwhelmed by my own narcissism. And that starts to rub up the wrong way against constructive criticism and other things of this nature. And and all the ugly things that narcissism is. So that's how I know that I'm dealing with some failure, and it's usually a big growing pain thing. And it's time for me to kind of step back, have a nice big slice of humble pie, and see if I can do a good self-inventory and take some constructive and loving criticism on board.
The younger generation is looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way, whether it's as an illustrator, a comic creator, or somewhere in between. Maybe you've inspired them on their own path to be a creative person. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Wow. I think there's a lot to the standing on the shoulders of people who came before you and looking a bit further into the horizon. So I think there's a lot to say for just very simply keeping it real, and kind of like being your true authentic self and finding a home for that. And seeing the value in yourself and really getting a grasp on an intrinsic value and what that means to you as an individual and to your counterparts that you're sharing your experience with, because everyone's generationally too has different experiences as well. So knowing that's something that is worth reflecting upon, documenting and sharing, and belongs in a bigger dialogue.
If your life was a comic book, what would its title be? And what would its soundtrack be?
Wow. Let's see. It'd be something about like meandering, but not altogether aimlessly, but meandering nonetheless. Very much an enjoyer of the journey and enjoyer of the process. I think, a lot of the soundtrack is, I have this deep, long love affair of very peaceful piano stuff. And then music that has a whole lot of lilt to it. So there's a deep love of Jelly Roll Morton and Scott Joplin in there, and then getting right into jump blues and some straight ahead jazz stuff. So I think there would probably be a whole lot of that for a soundtrack.
Well, John, I do hate to say it, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Before I let you go, where can we find you? How can we support you? Of course, where is this amazing comic and anything else you'd like to promote and share about?
Well, for the next, the remainder 3 issues of this, then, you can check in with Marcosia at their website and, Drive Through Comics, wherever else Marcosia is distributing. And then eventually that will go to print via them. And it's on Amazon Comixology, Cosmic. You have to by the way, disambiguate. There's several Cosmic Debris, and the other 2 are pretty amazing. So it takes a little poking around for right now. And and just for me and my paintings and what I do outside of this, that you could find me through my social media. That's what am I anyway? I'm Art of J.E. Murphy on Twitter. I don't know how long that place is lasting and how much I'm using it, but I do advertise a little bit there right now. And then over at, there's this digital homelessness taking place with everyone, as you know. So you got to kind of just look around. So right now I'm John Murphy on Blue Sky, and I love to follow other creators back. There's a lot to learn all the time, constantly learning. So, and engaging. I love engaging other people. So that's another great place to find me as well.
Well, like I said, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. You can, of course, find this interview and 1,000+ others on our website, tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's TWO, not the number 2. Different website you don't want to go to, trust me. The website's going through a revamp, so go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/TGT Media. The podcast is back after 12 or so years. You can find it at twogeekstalking.podbean.com or just search for Two Geeks Talking wherever you listen to your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.